Long before kingdoms carved borders into stone, before the elements bowed to chosen hands, there was only breath. Unseen. Untamed. A rhythm older than fire or form. And at the edge of the world, where the sky met silence, a boy stood, not as a warrior, not as a legend, but as the question the world had forgotten to ask. He was born in quiet, but the wind remembered him. It twisted above the mountain, tugged at his limbs, stirred the sigils beneath his feet. Even the spirits paused, not in fear, but recognition. For the mountain had never known a child who breathed against it. Ari did not command the wind. He listened. And in that listening, it spoke. Not in words, but in movement, in memory. Around him, the world turned weightless, not from power, but permission. For in him, the wind did not find a master, it found its voice. Then the breath became a wave. A burst of truth echoing across cloud and stone. Mountains shifted. Spirits stirred. Somewhere far below, the world flinched. For the first time in countless ages, the air moved on its own. On his knees, breathless and broken, he looked up, into the face of something older than wind. Judgment hung above him in the shape of skyborn spirit. But there was no anger. No welcome. Only recognition, and a question the world had forgotten how to ask. The wind had lifted him, but it would not carry him. Every step down the mountain was a promise, that he would face what the sky could not forgive. For even breath must find the ground, and learn to walk. Stone does not stir for mortals. It does not tremble without reason. But as his breath slowed, the ground listened. Something old, and angry, woke beneath his feet. The spirit rose not as a threat, but as a test. Its body was the mountain. Its gaze, the memory of earthquakes. And before it, Ari stood, not as an heir to power, but as a question carved in flesh and fear. He did not run. He did not plead. He simply breathed. In. Out. And where fear might have once lived, only stillness remained. The wind circled him. The mountain waited. And the boy chose to stand. When stone met breath, the world held its pulse. It was not might that moved the mountain's arm, but balance. Harmony struck like lightning in wind's embrace. And in that instant, Ari was no longer a boy, he was the breath the world once lost. Even stone, when moved by the breath of purpose, will bow, not in defeat, but in reverence. Breath of origin. Child of wind, the sky remembers you. Before the flame. Before the tides. Before the shaping hands of earth, there was breath. Not wielded. Not claimed. But born. The mountain had not fallen. It had whispered back. And in that silence, Ari finally heard who he was becoming. In stillness, he stood. Not as a warrior. Not as an avatar. But as the wind's first voice. Risen with the dawn, and remembered by the sky. He descended into the valley where fire had forgotten its purpose. Where ash still whispered the names of the lost. And though his feet bled on broken stone, the wind walked with him. A silent witness to the aftermath of rage. Kale had once danced in the heart of flame. Now, he crouched in its ruin. Not out of fear. But because he'd learned what fire could take. When left to burn without reason. From behind shadowed stone, flame watched breath approach. The boy was no soldier. No priest. Just a breeze, moving through scars. Yet the wind at his feet stirred ancient embers. And Kale could not look away. "Who are you?" the fire asked. Not as a challenge, but as a cry from a flame afraid to be extinguished. And the wind, gentle, fearless, stepped forward, answering only with presence. When flame met breath, no battle came. Only the quiet hush of possibility. Kale did not kneel to power, but to peace. And in that moment, the ruins held their breath, as two broken boys stood where war once breathed. The wind and fire moved as strangers, but walked the path of ghosts together. The marsh did not speak. It remembered. Every drowning, every scream, held in the hush of black water, and the tremble of a boy's touch. From stillness rose a voice. Not in words, but in water shaped like warning. Nida. The marsh's breath made flesh. Water waits. Fire flares. But wind listens. 3 elements. 3 wounds. And 1 breath that sought to bind them. In the silence of perfect reflection, the water remembered what they had buried beneath ash, flame, and tide. He had never cried that day. Not truly. When the monastery burned, the wind had carried the ash, but left the ache behind. Kale had burned not because he wanted to, but because the fire obeyed the ones he feared more than death. And in the smoke of that obedience, his shame still smoldered. Water does not break. It remembers. It returns. And when grief speaks loud enough, it rises. They had walked through fire. They had touched sorrow. And still, they breathed. They stood above the bones of the first earthbenders. And the bones stirred. Stone had slumbered for 1,000 years. But today, it awoke angry. They were not yet masters. But they were no longer children. Alone, they would fall. But together, they were pressure, flame, and flood. They had earned the path forward. Not by dominance, but by unity. Where the heavens kiss the water, and the earth dares not stir, there floats the breath of the first winds. Only those who walk without burden may pass. The water sees the weight they carry, and lets them fall. The sky mirror does not rise. It remembers how to stand. They were not just memories. They were waiting. For breath. For blood. For the boy who had once been the wind. The first airbender was not born. He was remembered. By the wind. By the world. By the silence he now fills. The breath of the world gathered at his feet. But not all winds are kind. The storm answered. But not to him. Something else had called it. They fought not just to protect him, but the truth he carried. In stillness, he found their breath. And in their breath, he remembered who he was. When the wind finally roared, it did not scream. It remembered its name. Even in silence, the wind spoke. And what it whispered came from beneath. The sky we knew was never above us. They passed through sky and sea, into the hollow where the wind once waited. The breath that gave the world its winds was never lost, only waiting to return. He was never chosen. He was remembered. Because the wind does not forget its first breath. The wind returned. But the world it re-entered had changed. Far in the south, the flame remembered the breath it once envied. Together, they sharpened the edge of the storm that would come. The echo did not stop at the mountains. It stirred what should have stayed asleep. Even the wind must rest. Between storms, they feared not the boy, but the idea that the wind could choose itself. The wind found him not because he was ready, but because he was alone. The world demanded peace, but came dressed for war. When the wind was still, they misunderstood. When it moved, they were too slow. He was not the last to inherit the wind. He was the first to hear it, and choose not to bow.
From the winds of legend, a hero rises. Join the journey, hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode.